throughout the course of this play?
The play takes place in a Buddhist center. There are a few of them in New York, and it takes place over 5 weeks. 6 people come and meet with a leader, and they've all been traumatized as young people in their lives, and they get together every week to sort out what that is like and to share being together in a place that they feel safe. And of course, the play is, because it's a great play, pretty quickly someone new comes and it changes the dynamic of the room. And so what I love about the play is that it's really about the intimate sort of connections between people who don't otherwise see each other, and they just survive on the language that they use in this room once a week. And of course, the language has to be very particular because they're trying to keep each other safe. And I think every great play in some way questions the way language can either, I think ultimately a lot of great plays show that language fails. I mean, the language fails us in some way, but it does examine how language works to help us stay together. And that's why I loved the play. And it's also, and you know, full disclosure, I mean, I live together and we just laugh a lot, and it's really funny. I mean, amongst other things, it's just a very funny play.
Well, I want to talk about that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because for people listening, Emma and Dan are a couple, and something that happens in the play is a couple enter this kind of sacred space it's a group. Think of it as group therapy, right? It takes place at a Buddhist center, and there's Buddhist philosophies and rituals that are a part of the work, but it does, you know, remind me. And I really came away, and Stephen and Dan and Emma, you can all tell me if you've done this. I sort of thought, wow, the only other group therapy scene I kind of know is from that movie Heartburn. Are you guys familiar with it? Right. Yeah. And I remember, you know, when they get robbed and Meryl Streep loses, you know, her ring. But I remember thinking, like, that actually seems amazing. If you can get the right group of people together, to have a place where you go weekly with intimate strangers seemed like a really incredible thing. And I wondered, like, Stephen, have you ever been in any kind of group therapy in your life?
Well, there's an argument that any film set qualifies as a form of group therapy. But no, I've not personally. So this was all new to me and fascinating. And it also sort of explores this paradox, which is other people can be both a source of trauma and a path to healing. And navigating that dichotomy for people who are in a heightened emotional state can be tricky. But I think what Emma did that was so impressive to me was to create an architecture and a sort of math to how information is released and how we learn about each of the characters. The revelations come when you don't expect them. And when they do come, they tend not to be what you expected. And to keep that narrative ball afloat, you know, for 93 minutes, I think is a real achievement. So it's been really gratifying, I have to say, to see it. Like for all of us to have talked about it is one thing, but seeing the first preview, having an audience there and seeing the show finished was incredibly gratifying for me. I hope it was for Dan and Emma, but it's fun to see something happen. I think that's what when I said, well, you know, why don't we just do this ourselves? It was really born out of that desire to have it become real instead of just something we were all talking about.
So
Sorry,
how
and
long
then-
did it take from that conversation to like fruition, from let's do it to I got to see it?
I don't know, was it 9 months?
9 months.
It's
Okay.
amazing.
maybe 9 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dan. I didn't hear you at first. What were you saying?
I was going to say, the thing that was what is so gratifying, and I have to say that when, unlike a film, when you get into the room and the audience is alive, just as the people on stage are alive, it's like, I looked over at Emma at one point when people are starting to kind of get the humor of what's happening on stage. It's a revelation and incredibly exciting, and it's exciting every night.
Yeah.
Because they're really responding every night because of the beautiful way Emma, organized the story. It's just it's a story about it really, it focuses on really sort of one person, but it focuses on all of them in some way. And I've been in group therapy. It's group therapy. I was in one for 7 or 8 years, and I have to say the way Emma, and she should start to really talk about her life, in terms of this play, but to abbreviate what took me 7 years to sort of experience into 90 minutes and 5 scenes that are just perfect, is an incredible achievement. And and the actors are feeling the same way, they're having, and to create a new play, and discovering the little things that Emma and even in the conscious things she did were incredible, but then the unconscious things that weave in and out, or you discover, as you find out what actors are feeling and what things.
And they
connect.
discover it freshly every night because every audience is different, and they ride this wave of the audience. And I think they discover new things every single
Oh yeah,
night.
they do.
It's amazing.
And sometimes I do too.
I mean, it's a living thing,
Yeah.
Well, the night I was there, your father was there, Emma.
Oh.
And I mean, I know when I'm in something, my dad comes multiple times. So it may be hard for you to clock which night that was because, it looked like you were very close with each other and it might not have been the only time he came. But without, I want to respect your privacy, but I also feel like I get a sense that this is a very personal story for you and why it's so powerful and hilarious in the way that only when you really go to someplace dark can that kind of gallows humor free you at the same time. So I just want to say for listeners, although everyone in this play is dealing with a trauma that brings them week after week to this group, the laughs are huge. And it's such a great release for all of us in the audience to have both of those things sort of riding. You rode the line really magnificently of not making fun of this, as it's so easy to make fun of these sorts of tropes, right? Like crazy people in New York in group therapy, like there's no real therapist in the room, right? Like there's a way in which it could be not taken seriously, and it is unbelievably serious what you've done.
Yeah, it is. I actually attended a group like this, and it really changed my whole way of thinking. And I don't mind to talk about the fact that I'm essentially the Thea character. And my mother was killed in the bombing of Pan Am 103 over Lockerbie when I was 6, as she says in the play. And I went to this group, and at the time that I went, I have really been all my life, ever since I became a kind of more thinking person. I mean, not when I was 6, but maybe starting at 11, really interested in trying to figure out why that event happened, and really convinced that the US government was as much to blame as the Libyans, and was working on this timeline that she talks about in this play of, 20 million years leading up to what happened to my mother and her murder, and assigning blame going back to actually it's 4.6 billion in real life. And then I enter, you keep going back and back. And, when did America become an aggressive country? And then you have to go back to England and then Greece. And at this point, I'm entering this group, and I'd never done anything Buddhist, even though my mother, was a Buddhist, but I'd never experienced it. And for them, and they'd been through things that were of a completely different order, even though we never spoke of it, it was clear that their traumas were ones that were more directly pertaining to their physical selves, you know what I mean, like abuse. And And there they were, and all they were trying to do of a given day was to have compassion for the people who hurt them, not assign blame, not figure out who did it and why, but just simply have compassion by understanding what the people who hurt them had suffered, or at least making it up. You didn't even have to know, and that was a completely different way of looking at things for me.
Well, it was, and it also aligned with your understanding that it wasn't the simple political, it wasn't the simple reason given to you by the mass media, that there was so much more involved. And it aligns with that kind of feeling. And people come to the play and they share that. They everyone comes, and whether it's a huge hurt or a huge trauma, but people have hurt us, and at their different moments, and I don't want to give anything away, but particularly towards the end, you begin to be asked every time I see it to think of people who've hurt us personally, and everyone who lives in this world at some point, unless they're brought up in a box in some university. They have felt this, and to feel that we should feel compassion for that person is something that you brought to my life in some way, and also in a big way to the play, but in a way that is, it's hilarious because no one is allowed to talk about their traumas. You see, they're not allowed to speak about them, as having seen it, and then yet, of course, everyone breaks the rules, at some point.
Well, I feel like the power of good storytelling is that everyone finds a way in, right? Like, regardless of their experience, listen, as humans, we all have something, right? And I think some of us are much more in tune with it than others. And so I found that what was thrilling about this play, and I'm sure Stephen, Dan, Emma, you have all felt this too, it's really thrilling to see a play where people are clamoring to go have dinner after again and talk. I mean, post-pandemic, what an incredible thing to sit in a theater again with other people, some strangers, some friends, and be part of a communal experience. So I think so much about, when I asked you why sort of a play versus a film, I mean, I know for me, there's nothing like sitting in a live theatrical experience, and I eat movies, right? Like, I love movies as much as anyone could love movies, but there is something really unique about being in the presence of the person performing for you, and that live and the exchange that can only happen. And there are audible gasps in your show. There are tears, there's laughter, there's real recognition. At one point I thought of the main character, when you tell your story, and it's so generous of you to share your story in that way, because it's yours, and it would be fair for you to keep it just for yourself and not make it a place that people can have a catharsis. So thank you, because it's an extraordinarily beautiful and generous thing to do. And it must feel very vulnerable and revealing, although not everyone who comes in that theater knows, the writer is the woman who this is based on. So there's some protection in that way. But now after this interview, it has a lot of people listening. So it is more out there, right? Yeah. And you're prepared for that, I'm sure.
Course. I mean, I wrote it into the play. So
exactly.
If I was a really private person about it, I wouldn't have.
Exactly. But I just have to say, like, your brain is so incredible to me that you are the person, I think of like Carrie in Homeland, who has like all of, when she has like those boards on the wall of like trying to really understand how something's happening. Like, you have that kind of, deep cover FBI agent sort of brain that can really connect these dots, and a passion, and just the amount you've learned about the world that I imagine is so useful in ways that aren't related to this very painful thing. Your curiosity is just staggering and absolutely inspirational. You say that it really lent itself to being a play, and I agree, but I was also sitting there and, knowing Stephen and Dan and their relationship to filmed storytelling. And I just see a million possibilities of ways in which it could translate to the screen, which is not relevant for this conversation right now, but it does seem like it wants to be seen by more people. And we do still live in a world where film and streaming is how things get into more people's homes. And so that's my personal feeling about it.
It's funny. It's funny you should say that, because I was thinking about how, and you were talking about film and how you love film. And there are more films that have changed my life, many more than plays, for sure. I think the reason why I've chosen theater is the actual process of it. I love the fact that we, don't shoot things out of order, if you know what I'm saying, that we run from start to finish, even in the rehearsal room. I love that aspect of it. I love that there's no waiting around, that it's only working with the actors, that it's only, and that process is what I love. It's not that I respect theater more. And so what's sort of lovely is the idea of having that process and then having this organic thing on stage, and then whatever happens to it would be amazingly exciting, because it kind of exists. It came to fruition through that wonderful live theatrical process. Does that make sense?
100%. But I do want to ask you, and Stephen, you can weigh in as the producer who somehow, producer means so many things, right?
Yeah.
And I think so it can be like a cheerleader and someone lending their name to something because they have a certain cachet in the world. It can be helping to raise money. It can be like, I'm going to give you notes after I see some previews. So I guess I want you to all jump in. Was there any trepidation about working together as friends, as a couple? Was there a discussion between the three of you? Any hesitation at all?
Not for me.
No.
And it's functioned very much like our pre-existing friendship, which is sort of based on, the fact that none of us are fronting to each other about anything. So we have very frank, honest, respectful, fun conversations. My job, as I see it, is to facilitate what Dan and Emma are trying to accomplish and kind of key off what's happening to determine how forward facing I should be. The play is the thing, as they say. And so I tried to just sort of surf that a little bit and be around when I'm needed. But it was so much fun not to be responsible in any significant way,
Right.
in a way that I would find, pressurized. For me, it was pretty much pleasure from beginning to end, because I didn't view it as mine in that sense. But it really is, to your point, the live experience for this play, I think, is heightened, because at a certain point you really begin to feel like you're one of the members of the group.
Yes,
and
100%.
you just become enveloped in it, and that's the accumulative effect of that, I think, is very powerful, and as you said, unique to theater.
And also you really, the word empathy gets thrown around so much, right? It's like a hashtag at this point in our culture, but there really is a reminder, a beautiful reminder, that everyone, I'm saying something that is so like stating the obvious, but it is great to be reminded as we go through our day that everyone has a story. right? Like
Yeah.
everyone has a story, and we just don't always understand where people are coming from. And it is just an incredible thing to really be reminded and to be curious about what other people's stories are. And I think that is one of the amazing takeaways of this play. As we go through our day, whether I, as a New Yorker, I'm on the subway 100 times a day. I'm so engaged and involved with other people that are strangers to me. And I walked out of your play, and I've spent so many rides now kind of just looking at people, not at my phone, and going like, what's there, a trauma doesn't define us, but it is the beginning of a story that we need to react and relate to our whole lives, right? And whether it's about learning to not let it define us and our relationships, whatever it is, whatever the goal is, once we can kind of pinpoint. And in some ways, what's amazing about this play and what's harder for some people is everyone in that room can kind of pinpoint, like, this is the thing that and some people don't have that. They can't sort of articulate what the thing is. So it's kind of amazing to be in the presence of your cast that made it all feel so real. Like, it really, as Stephen said, like by the end, like you feel like you're in a group. Like I said, I wanted to go join one. Like there was something, even with the foibles and tensions and comedic aspects of it.
The foibles of people are what make us love people in some way. And the thing about the play that's so, people say, as young writers start out, you say, well, write about what you know and write about yourself. And you often find then they come back with material that is not as entertaining or built for a larger audience. And the beauty and the beautiful craft of this is that while it's personal and very personal in some ways, it also actually is a piece that Emma's constructed. So it's not really about her. It's about all these other people as well. And you don't get the sort of cloying sense. An entertainment. It's a completely entertaining piece of work. And yet the personal stuff is what makes it so particular and special and allows people to sort of weigh in. And that's the kind of magic that she's created in the language.
And I want to talk to you about process for a moment, if you don't mind, because this is very raw. Like all of the characters in this play are dealing with like incredibly painful and real events. And I can imagine, as an actor, as all of us as artists in a room, when you're exploring material that is deeply felt in the way that this is, comedic elements included, it brings up a lot, right, for the people portraying these roles. And some of them may feel really directly aligned with the characters they played. Maybe some of them had to come to it from as if, right, doing actors work in that way. But how do you, as a director, create a room where everyone feels safe the way you would hope they would in an actual room that they're in the play? Like, what were some of the elements that you set up early on as a director to create that kind of space for everyone?
I think just being incredibly encouraging and having, first, it's having really talented actors and actors who are willing, to share the journey. I mean, I'm a kind of a guide to the journey of discovering a play. That's sort of not an original sentence, but it's now, I've said it, so I'm owning it. So the truth is, you're just showing up every day and knowing, having gone through the process of being in a group actually was really helpful, but just allowing them, there's no intimacy without conflict. You can't have intimacy without conflict because there's always friction where people are coming close together. So I'm very comfortable with conflict, and particularly if I'm given the role of being the director, where I get to be the person who says conflict is a safe space. We got to have conflict, and with conflict you find the intimacy. And the process of the rehearsal was delightful and challenging because people really did have to open up to certain things, some of them more than others. and some of them in ways that made others feel uncomfortable or made them feel, they began a little bit to be like the characters in some way. That's a natural experience for doing this. And that's why I love directing, because you get to meet people and talk about real things that are intimate. I mean, what a rush if I could, I come away from it and I miss it. You miss that because it's like the high moments of life when you can connect with another person. And I've connected with them for so long, and I've connected with Stephen for so long, in conversations that matter to us, and we go straight to the heart of the matter when we can. And so this rehearsal process was these 7 completely different people whom I'd never met. And given these lines to say and figure out. So through that, we get to be close, and you get to be close to someone else. And it's hard to be close to other people. You walk down the street and you walk in a store and you think, that's an interesting looking person. Like you say in the subway, I'd like to talk to them for a bit. And then you say something and then you realize, I don't really have, I guess we have to go away now because I bought the pack of gum,
Right.
and there's this sort of sadness in that. And
Right.
this is a way. So to answer your question, the process sort of takes care of itself, and you just want to make everyone feel like they can take risks, and say something stupid and move somewhere else. And believe me, I had to too. I was there are moments when you don't know what's going on, and some of the best advice that both Stephen and some other people said is, there's some moments we just get to say to everybody, there's a problem here. I don't know what it is, and how are we going to solve it? And that's
Right.
And
right.
that's
To be
true.
brave enough to say, I don't know.
It was one of the greatest things I could do. Made everyone feel confident in their part. So, and also Stephen was he sort of was very confident in a way that allowed him, I guess, to say, go forth and do it. And he didn't really want to see it until we wanted. He didn't want to come in the room until we were ready. And I've worked with a bunch of producers, and this was one.
Not always the way.
It's not always the way, and in most cases, it's not that. In most cases, it's not that helpful. Stephen has just made it easier for us, because actually, you asked whether there was any pressure. I felt slightly some pressure because the play was great, and I admire Stephen, and I wanted it to be as good as it is.
But I think again, like, you have to feel safe. You have to feel that people have faith in you to be able to take those risks and face that pressure. And that's really what I felt from Stephen when he went to an early, he read an early draft, and he went to a reading before we cast it and before we began to rehearse it. The play changed greatly from there. And I think he knew it would. He knew it would get better. He knew I'd cut it down. He knew all these things would happen, but the essential nugget of it, he really loved. And he just had faith that we would, through the process, get it where it needed to be. And it was just a lovely, I don't know, it just made me and Dan feel like we could really roll up our sleeves and get to work with joy as opposed to with dread. And anyway, I really
How
appreciate
incredible to get to be in love and get to make art together. Like, what else? Truly, like, what else could anybody wish for? And to make something with your friend, like, it's so incredible. It's so incredible. I also just loved how much New York was a character in the play. I feel like there are so many layers to this thing. And your designers did such an incredible job. It's challenging when you have one set and you want to create a sense of time moving forward, and how to do that in a way that's not clunky, that doesn't stop the action of the play. I mean, there are challenges, and I felt like, I don't know, it was a very seamless and felt really effortless by the time the audience was in there, which is such a testament to all of you and your entire creative team. And I really, I guess my last question would be sort of what, and any of you jump in, or all of you, can't wait for Emily to join in also, because she really, I'm sure, has a lot to say. That was a joke about
Yeah.
calling Emma really
Our
4 times
fourth.
earlier in the
Yeah.
bio read that none of you will hear, listeners,
That
but I
was a
just had
good
a
one.
crazy, my brain was freezing. What is your hope? I mean, what's your dream that's sort of the takeaway is, or, you know, I certainly have expressed how moved I was and how great it was to have the levity also, like all of it in the experience as an audience member. But what's your hope for it?
Who wants to start? Probably the author.
I guess my hope is just, well, I don't know. I mean, it's something that Stephen said. He said he wanted every man, woman, and child to see the play. I mean, that's a quote from someone else. But my hope would be that more people, the most people possible, could see this. You know, whether in this iteration or in another. You know, is that a silly thing to say? I don't know. I just want a lot of everyone who's come, and in a lot of them. I mean, there's been about, I mean, random people who've come who I don't know, and then also, you know, tons of people who I deeply respect as artists, who I either know or are friends of friends. I've just loved it, and I just feel like I don't know. I just want everyone to get the chance to see it.
There's nothing. Look, I love movies, and I usually can watch movies when they're bad. But there's nothing worse than sitting in a theater when a play is not entertaining.
Yes,
But
you're
there's
right.
nothing worse. First, the seats are uncomfortable.
Right. There's no
But-
leg room. Exactly.
But in the same way, there's nothing better. There's nothing more exhilarating than seeing a great play. And a great play to me, as a structural piece, as a piece of writing, is to me, it's a miracle. Because you know, in a movie structure, it's very linear. There's nothing. But this is a woven, you know, it's a net that's sort of dropped over a part of Emma's mind as a storyteller and dropped onto the stage, and it's a miracle. So, you know, I just, everyone who goes in, you see that the audiences come in and they have such a good time. So
Yeah.
it's just and the hope is that, and as you say, it's wonderful to see people being happy
Yeah.
and moved, and I just
You
want
want
more
more.
people to be able to do that.
You want more happy people.
So, and that will happen. I mean, what's great about it also is that it exists. It exists, you know, it exists forever, you know.
Well, it's also an incredibly producible play. I mean, it has a large cast, but it's like a very straightforward. It's very producible, as Mr. Soderbergh can attest to, right? Like it is.
Yeah.
It's so doable, right? And I see this is like, this could happen not just, you know, on off Broadway and Broadway stages, but in terms of like for like college students. Like there's a whole world of people, I think, like this play will be done and done and done. Other countries, all of it, but because it is so universal and it really has roles for everybody, like it's kind of fantastic in that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's also not tied to any particular political moment in
No.
time.
Yeah.
This could have been years ago. It could be years from now. It's not anchored in that way to something topical, which I think really makes it, as you said, producible, but also I think it takes a certain lack of ego to be willing to entertain, as opposed to just pull somebody into your kind of private salon. And I think that speaks to, you know, the work that Emma's done to integrate an event into her life and then integrate it into her work. That takes time and effort, and then to pivot and say, well, I'm going to start from a place of wanting to entertain people. I think is just the sign of a mature artist, and I don't think any of us want to participate in something that feels like single-use plastic. But at the same time, it's people are the most open to new ideas or new perspectives when they're laughing. That they're never more open.
Yeah.
And so Emma's understanding of that
Yeah.
and strategic use of that, I think, is what makes it really sing. And I don't know anybody who can come out of this play and not go to that place of, how do I feel about somebody who's done me wrong in some way? Or conversely, and I think just as importantly, who have I hurt?
And exactly. I think that is such a powerful thing you just said. I think it really does put you on both sides of the story in that way. And I also think, you know, with the actress and the character sort of inhabiting your story, when there isn't a single person, right? When it's really hard, you know, it's so complex, the hurt and the why, as you describe, in terms of the entire history of the world. And to go through life not wanting to go, well, then I'm going to blow up the world, because that's the only way I can get sort of clarity about it.
Right.
So, and you can't, right? So how do you know, it's not going to one person. But I just want to end, because I really was so moved when Dan introduced me to you and your father. If you could just sort of end this story for me today with what it is like to sit next to your dad watching this story together.
Actually, I've never sat next to him during the show. I usually hide in the back. But no, it has been amazing. And my father just, you know, I think for him, he just felt like it gave a lot of sort of, I don't know, the sweetest thing he said is he said, I just remember those times, you know, I just remember those times about my mother being this sort of wonderfully eccentric woman with all these Buddhas and the incense. And there literally was that group of the women wandering around naked. You know, he'd come home from work and they'd be like fat women wandering around naked through the apartment. And so in part, it was really lovely for him to remember all of that. And I don't know quite what to say. I think he just really, you know, there is no greater lover of theater than my father. He goes every single night to some off Broadway in the outer reaches of, you know, wherever, Brooklyn thing, having nothing to do with his clients. And I think that more than anything, just the fact that I made a play that he loved and respected, and it pleased him more than almost any of it, if that makes sense. Like
That's really,
I think that rich, like Stephen was saying, you know, there's something about rich, well done structure that really can open up the heart, you know. Also humor can too, but like if it's not well done, then it doesn't allow us to feel, if that makes sense. So
well, thank you for all of it. The play right now is scheduled to run until
July 9th.
Okay, to July 9th. And how do people get tickets to see your play?
That's a really good question. As a producer, I should know the answer to that.
our website,
Yeah.
which is thefearsplay.com. www.thefearsplay.com. That's a plural fear.
Well, congratulations to all of you. It's beautiful. And I wish it tremendous success. And I can't wait to share this episode so people can just hear about it. It's just a really beautiful, beautiful, hilarious, wonderful night in the theater. So bravo to all of you. And thank you
so much. Thanks for
You're
having
so
me.
welcome. Of
Thank you.
course. All right, all. Have a great day. Thank you for being on the show. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.